The following vlog is submission to SAC 7101. I'll be looking at two movements in the weight room and breaking down the movement patterns to see if my athletes have a skill or capacity issue. I'll then be analysing their movement using the Canova video software. I'll be analysing the back squat and the bilateral hinge. But before we do, I think it's important that we define what a skill and capacity are. I have defined a skill as an individual's ability to complete a movement pattern in the most efficient ways possible, utilising their capacities and the global representations available to them. These are learnt through practice and exploration, and they may not be achieved if there is a capacity issue or we have not developed appropriate construction and depth of the different attractor states. A capacity can be defined as the structures and general function moderating the body's ability to achieve a specific movement outcome, i.e. the desired movement pattern during an exercise in the weight room. These capacity issues will be down to the internal physics of the body, for example, structural inefficiencies that don't allow us to achieve the movement outcomes, for example, not reaching the depth desired in a squat. When analysing movement, we must first rule out a capacity issue to make our diagnosis, and both are vital to achieve optimal movement. First movement we'll look at is the back squat with Alex, who I believe presents a skill issue. As we watch Alex squat from the frontal plane, it's quite clear to see a number of issues. He sets up quite narrow in his feet, and as we see him squat down, it's quite clear there's a hip shift to the left. As we watch Alex squat down, I've highlighted this hip shift here. It's also further highlighted by the fact that we can see the outside aspect of his right knee, where the left knee is invisible from this angle. As we change our angle and watch Alex squat from the sagittal plane, a number of other issues quickly present themselves. It's clear to see that his weight is shifting forwards into his forefoot due to the forward lean in his trunk angle as he's trying to make depth. As Alex has initiated this movement with his knees, he has reached max ankle flexion early, meaning he is overcompensating at the spine, making this a hip dominant movement. This is leading to the bar being over our forefoot and not over our base of support, which would be optimal. And we can see from this image that Alex is unable to get his thighs parallel to the ground. Alex's knees are tracking over his toes, and he is able to keep a neutral spine, which leads me to believe this is a skill issue, however further investigation is needed. The first thing I would assess is Alex's ankle mobility, using a weighted knee-to-wall test. Using the normative data supplied by Hotch and Rukon in 2010, I can rule out that Alex has any relevant impairments in his ankle such as subtalar dorsiflexion. I then moved on to test Alex's hip mobility using a modified T-test. There is a slight raise in his right leg. This was the same for the left. This is not optimal, but it's definitely an acceptable range in hip mobility. Alex does show some minor mobility issues. However, I believe the mobility issues it shows far more outweigh the restrictions in capacity. Therefore, I believe that corrective exercise and cues will help Alex learn this movement efficiently. First exercise is a pole squat using a counterbalance. Alex maintains a great posture and he is able to hold a good upright trunk with his thighs going below parallel. As I'm cueing Alex to open up his hips and sit into the squat whilst giving him positive feedback, this will help him feel how the movement should feel without the pole later on. The second exercise I'm using here is a driver squat, again using that counterbalance to help Alex sit back into that squat. And we see here he's pushing his knees out and there is no obvious hip shift. I would continue to program these drills and other squat regressions to help Alex progress in his squat skill. There are obviously some mobility issues at play, but objective data shows me that this is clearly a skill issue, probably leading to balance, and that Alex can learn this through my program. We will now move on to Lloyd's back squat, where I believe he has a capacity issue. When viewing Lloyd's start position from the sagittal plane, it's clear to see the bar isn't even on his upper traps, meaning the weight would not be distributed evenly across his body. There are clearly a number of issues with Lloyd's squat, and as he was a front row forward for 12 years in rugby union, it's hardly surprising. In the bottom position, we see a large forward lean, leading to a suboptimal trunk angle, putting a lot of pressure on the spine. We can also see a slight beginning of tucking of the pelvis, leading to flexion of the lumbar spine. We can see that he is getting his knees over his toes. However, as we look at the bar angle, it is uneven and well away from the base of his support. As we view Lloyd's squat from the frontal plane, we can see a slight hip shift to the right. This is shown by the fact that we can see more of the lateral side of the left knee than we can the right. We can also see eversion of the right foot and a slight heel lift, as shown by the magnified image in the top left. This is a suboptimal loading strategy. The weight should be distributed evenly across the base of support. However, as the weight shifts forward and the heel rises, it is putting undue pressure on the ankle joint and could lead to injury. I have moved Lloyd onto a pole squat to give him a counterbalance. However, you can see he still rounds at the lumbar spine and is unable to disassociate his hips from his spine. And even with cueing on this exercise, he is unable to reach the desired depth. As Lloyd shows asymmetries at his base of support, the first thing I will test is his ankle range of motion. On his left ankle, Lloyd completes the test with ease and scores within the acceptable range. However, when we move on to the right ankle, Lloyd expresses some discomfort and his score is over 4 centimetres from the desired range. As this is at the base of support, I believe this to be the main capacity issue that is leading to lots of Lloyd's squat issues. I have put a number of ankle mobility drills in place for Lloyd to help push that ankle range of motion. Furthermore, as the asymmetry is so high and he is expressing discomfort, I would recommend that he sees a physiotherapist about this issue. I would still program a number of assistance exercises, but I would not load the back squat until these issues had been addressed. Lloyd and Alex both show a number of issues in their squat. They both present a hip shift and a suboptimal bar position. However, Alex achieved optimal range in the mobility tests relating to the squat and was able to achieve the correct movement patterns using different derivatives. Therefore, I'm confident that Alex presents a skill issue and Lloyd presents a capacity issue, and I will coach them accordingly. The next movement we are looking at is the bilateral hinge, or an RDL, with Alex, who I believe presents a skill issue. As we view Alex hinge from the sagittal plane, it's clear he initiates his movement by flexing his spine rather than pushing his hips back, which results in this curved back position where we see a lot of his spine using flexion to create this depth. This is a suboptimal movement strategy, and if we were to load this movement, it would put undue pressure on the spine and would no doubt cause capacity issues further down the line. We can see from this image, as demonstrated by the blue line, that Alex is trying to hyperextend his knee. This would put pressure on the ligaments of the knee, predominantly PCL, and could result in weakness of those ligaments. From first view, it looks like he has good hamstring flexibility, so this may be a skill issue, however further investigation is needed. Therefore, the first thing I'm checking is Alex's hamstring mobility. As you can see from the line drawn, this would be classed as a 2/3 on the FMS test. Cook et al. In 2014 stated that this would be a minor limitation and tightness may exist within the muscle. Therefore, I conducted a toe touch test, and anecdotally, I think Alex's hamstring flexibility isn't optimal but isn't creating his hinge issues. I would then take Alex through some hinge regressions where I would cue him to have a slight bend in his knee, pin his scapulars together and push his hips away from him rather than bending at the spine. By giving him a dowel in 2 exercises and using the wall in the first one, I'm applying sensory feedback as well as verbal to help him learn the movement. After a circuit of these movements and my coaching cues, it's clear to see Alex has improved his bilateral hinge. Next, we'll look at Lloyd's bilateral hinge, where I believe he has a capacity issue. Looking at Lloyd's bilateral hinge from the sagittal plane, we can see that he doesn't reach optimal depth. After cueing to keep his scapulars pinned and push his hips away from him, he expresses stiffness in his lower back and tightness in his hamstring. When testing Lloyd's hamstring flexibility with the active straight leg raise, it's clear to see with these lines drawn that both legs score a 1 on the FMS test, which Cook et al. 2014 state as gross mobility limitations. Also, using this mobility sequence, it's clear to see Lloyd has a tight lumbar spine and is unable to disassociate his hips from his spine. I would program a number of hamstring and lower back mobility drills to put into Lloyd's program to help him work on this mobility issue. To summarise, Alex presented a skill issue during his back squat by not reaching depth. He had a knee dominant strategy and a hip shift. We'd fix this through practice and cueing. Athlete 2, Lloyd, showed a capacity issue by not reaching depth, shows some discomfort, real lack of ankle mobility. During his squat we saw a hip shift and ankle eversion. We'd fix this through ankle mobility drills, and if his discomfort continued into pain, we would put him in touch with a physio. Bilateral hinge, Alex presented a non-optimal loading strategy by rounding at the back. We would fix this through practice drills and cueing. Athlete 2, Lloyd, showed a capacity issue, couldn't reach depth. We showed this through a lack of hamstring flexibility. We would fix this through hamstring mobility drills and PNF stretching.